Storytelling is where you connect with people. One of my favorite books, before I worked in the field that I'm in, I managed software sales teams. So pretty different. And one of my favorite books was the book 7 Stories Every Salesperson Must Tell. And it goes through all these different types of stories that you can communicate to essentially help you sell something. So it can be ways to connect personally or share insights or, kind of make someone feel like they can trust what you're doing. And I think it's a really challenging thing to do compelling storytelling. Part of working with athletes, honestly, is how we can do that.
Welcome to another episode of Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey to a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. My name is Pedro Couto Lopez. I'm your host. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. In this podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today we are diving into the world of sports nutrition, entrepreneurship, and the power of fueling both body and ambition with none other than Gabe Multer, founder and CEO of Carbs Fuel. Gabe is not just an entrepreneur. He is a lifelong cyclist, a problem solver, and a visionary who saw a gap in the endurance fueling industry and set out to fix it. His mission? To make high-quality, affordable energy accessible to all athletes without the overpriced gimmicks. But beyond Carbs Fuel, Gabe is shaping the future of sports nutrition and redefining what it means to support the cycling community around him. In this episode, we are going beyond the usual startup story. We will explore how cycling shapes Gabe's entrepreneurial mindset, the future of fueling and performance for endurance athletes, and some unexpected insights about creativity, resilience, and power of a well-fueled ride. So whether you are a cyclist, an entrepreneur, or someone chasing big dreams, this podcast is for you. Now, back to the episode. Welcome, Gabe, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. I wanted to start this conversation by looking at the challenges that cycling always makes us think of, whether it is, climbing that peak, whether it is achieving a goal event or completing 100 miles. There's always some kind of challenge that comes before a growth when you're riding a bike. And I think that every person that enjoys riding bikes goes through that. Has there ever been a moment in one of your rides or that reminded you of why you fell in love with cycling in the first place?
Yeah. Like you said, it's a super challenging sport and you need to push through all sorts of challenges. And, I think that's part of what makes it really satisfying. For me, I got into cycling when I was 12 or 13 years old. And I got into it really because my dad was a bike rider.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He rode bikes a lot. And I always just thought
was he a competitive cyclist or you just enjoyed riding bikes?
He was more in the boat of just enjoying to ride bikes. He had done some races, but I wouldn't identify him as like a bike racer necessarily, just more of like a lifestyle bike rider. But he was very serious about it and had been riding for like 30 years. And, so I always thought he was really cool for riding bikes. And I think as, a lot of sons do, they kind of want to be like their dad. And so I wanted to get into the sport. And I was thinking about this and what made me fall in love with the sport at the beginning versus what I kind of love about it day to day now. I really think what I loved about cycling from the get-go was kind of the sense of freedom and exploration that you get. And so I think I touched that feeling the most when I'm traveling with my bike and I'm riding in some place new. When I have an excuse to go over to a new town where I haven't been and get to explore new roads, I get that same sort of sense of freedom and exploration that reminds me of why I fell in love with the sport. I'd say I had a very complicated relationship with bikes for many years.
Okay.
Many people do. As someone
how come? Well, what happened? Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so when I got into the sport when I was like 13 or so, I quickly realized I was pretty good at it. And so I decided to make it like my entire personality and my entire life. And my whole dream was to be a World Tour pro and to race in the Tour de France and, live that sort of lifestyle. And so when I was racing early on, it was all about building towards that dream. When I was 18, I had to accept the fact that I was most definitely not going to be a World Tour pro. I was good at bikes, but not that good. And so it totally burned me out from the sport for many years. I didn't really touch a bike in my early 20s because I just had a very complicated relationship with it because of that dream kind of falling through. And so, I eventually refound my love for the sport, and, there's very different reasons of why I love it so much today as opposed to what I loved about it.
I mean, it's interesting because I think I can relate to that experience of, you are kind of really driven and you have a goal in mind or aspiration or what, becoming a world tour athlete, cyclist in this case. And at 18, you through circumstances, through looking at that, perhaps other athletes, that you're just not that good. It's not going to happen for you. Either you don't have the genes or you don't have the discipline, wherever it is.
Yeah.
I mean, and also it's interesting because it seems to have touched on the fact that you have looked up to your dad and for inspiration and saw it as a path. But you mentioned that you fell out of cycling, but you came back. And I'm curious to find out if that was on your own terms, if that was through you, after a few years of putting the bike in a garage and forgetting about it, and then just wonder if what I can do with the bike. What was that kind of turning point?
Yeah, I always think about making it at the top level of the sport as a combination of, you need to have the genes. You do need a level of raw talent, but you do also need the work ethic, and you need to really be willing to put in the work consistently, and you have to be so tough to be able to go out there. And, you need to also have that racer instinct in you. I think I lacked all of those things. I have talent, and I have work ethic, I have all this, but, like you're saying, you see these other people that you're racing against. And for me, when I was growing up, I had to race against Nielsen Paulus every weekend. And you see that kind of rider, and, at the time you don't know who they are, because they're not that person yet, but you're like, that person works harder than me and they're better than me. And it's definitely a sport where you compare yourself to others. But anyways, to answer your question directly of how I found my way back into it. Yeah, for a long time, I had a really toxic relationship with the bikes. Like I said, I'd stopped riding for years, and then I would pick up the bike, from the garage, like you were saying, and I'd start riding for a few months, and then I'd start getting fit, and then I'd start fantasizing, maybe I can become a pro, maybe it's going to be different this time. And I'd start dreaming again, and then I'd get mad at myself and say, no, it's not going to happen. Then I'd quit all over again. So I kept getting back in and then resetting, and it took me a really long time to be really happy and okay with riding my bike and not being able to make it a career, and so it really happened 3.5 years ago, I'd say. Maybe a little bit more. It was kind of around COVID time when I truly refound my love for the sport. And I think I was mature enough at that point and happy enough with, what the bike was able to give me, to where I just loved doing it, and it was totally okay to not be able to make a career out of it. So I always tell people, because I also run a cycling team in addition to Carbs Fuel.
Holy cow.
And so exactly. And so whenever I talk to someone who's interested in joining the team, I kind of tell them my story and, what I love about bikes. So what I always say is, there's 3 things that I love about bikes. I love the community, the friendships that you can make, and, the time that you can spend with really awesome people. I think it's an amazing thing that the bike lets you do that. I love it for, the sense of exploration, having an excuse to spend all day outside and see remote landscapes. And that's a really beautiful thing that the bike can let you do. And then the third thing is, I'm still competitive, and it's fun to push yourself and to have a competitive outlet in your adult life. I think is a really special thing, and the bike lets you do that. And so I think when I fully wrap my head around that I can get those 3 things out of riding my bike, and I love it as a part of my lifestyle, that's when I was able to come back to the sport and have that consistent love for it.
And now you are an entrepreneur, and I wanted to kind of find out from your perspective how cycling combines this role between your personal life and your personal growth. I guess you can compare, like, you have been on a journey of personal growth, and cycling has been side by side through that journey from since the age of 13 to now. And
Yeah.
at some point you have turned that kind of drive and that passion that from the first moment when you fell in love with a bicycle and the realization of what it means to you to ride a bike. How has cycling shaped your philosophy as a business leader and an innovator in the sector?
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with how my brain works. And,
Do
you
tell, do
know,
tell.
in, yeah, in business and in life in general, I think that two things primarily have come out of being a bike rider. I think that all the time that you spend by yourself, with your thoughts, has taught
Yeah.
me really to look inward and think through things a lot more and like
Mm-hmm.
take time to process things. I've
Yeah.
gotten really comfortable being in my own head and working out problems, while I'm riding my
Right.
bike, and being okay with silence and being alone. And I think cycling really taught me that. That, or I fell in love with cycling because I happen to be that type of person. So who knows what came first? But, I think that it's really taught me to be a bit more reflective, and that,
Yeah.
that matters a lot in how I operate the business, is taking time to think through
Mm-hmm.
problems rather than jump immediately. I'd say the other big thing is, I think cycling can teach you a bit of work ethic, so
Mm-hmm.
it's just constantly putting in the work.
Yeah.
I actually use the analogy rowing the boat. It's like
Yeah.
every day I have to get into the boat and start rowing it to try to get across the lake. And, you can't focus on the end goal of getting across the lake, because it
Exactly. Yeah.
takes a lot of time and you don't see it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So, I find in the bike, you're spending so much time in the saddle, you're training consistently, you can lose your fitness so quickly. And, it's about the consistency. It's about doing it every day.
Yeah.
And not seeing the immediate return. And I think that
Mm.
translates into business and the way that you operate a business quite directly,
Yeah.
because for me, running carbs, there are days, weeks where I feel like what I'm doing isn't doing what I want it to do. And you kind of have to trust the process, and you have to put in the work,
Yeah.
and you have to be consistent, and you have to believe that you're going in the right direction. It's going to take you where it's going to take you.
Yeah. It's a very good. I mean, yeah. You mentioned the journey that you have days where working, it doesn't feel like you're going anywhere, but you know playing to your metaphor, rowing the boat, you might not see necessarily the other side of the ocean or the shore, but you know that you're making progress. I
Yep.
guess it's, yeah. I mean, it ties in perfectly into. I mean, it's a bit corny to say this, but cycling is often a metaphor for life. You are balancing, you're pushing through challenges, you're going through on a
Yeah.
ride, and that takes you through three different landscapes. Takes you through different steps of that ride, and that, I think, that applies very neatly into running a business. I mean, I definitely can see it in my own experience of running a business, is that sometimes you just have to carry on, keep doing it, keep going, because
Yeah.
it might not be the best day, but there are going to be better days. I
Exactly.
mean, with Carbs Fuel, specifically, within sports nutrition world, it's very kind of challenging, and especially now with the cycling industry as it is. I mean, what was the reason behind starting it? Why did you decide starting? A lot of people can start a brand. Doesn't mean that they are going to be successful, but you know,
Yeah.
what is the core belief that led you to start a business?
Yeah. I'll start with kind of big picture in sports nutrition. I bet people listening are aware of a lot of this, but I think it's helpful from a context.
Yeah,
You know, the big shift in the last few years, especially, has been, people consuming a lot more than they were before. So, a lot of elite athletes are starting to consume 90 to 120 grams of carbs every single hour. And what they've realized is, people's gut can handle it as long as you train your gut's ability to do so. And it makes a really, really positive difference in how you feel and how well you perform.
I can attest to that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so people have realized, oh, I should be consuming more than I have been, and it's going to make a big difference. And so let's try to do this. The problem that I saw with the sports nutrition world was that products weren't formulated with that sort of consumption in mind. So your typical energy gel is 20 or 30 grams of carbohydrates. They're $2, $3, $4 per gel. And so if you start thinking about how you're actually achieving those high carbohydrate goals, you're thinking about consuming 3 or 4 gels every hour, which means you're consuming it every 15, 20 minutes. And you're carrying 20 gels on a huge ride. And the thing is, people don't deal with the cost and inconvenience for these products. They end up just underfueling and therefore underperforming, not feeling as good as they could. So the whole reason I started Carbs Fuel and, the angle that we take in the market is solving that specific problem. It's making fueling a bit more simple and a bit more accessible. So, our flagship product is an energy gel, and it's 50 grams of carbohydrates, and it's $2, which makes it by a very significant margin the best value gel in the world. Now, beyond that, it's also very simple. So it's just water, 3 types of carbohydrates, and a 2-to-1 glucose to fructose ratio, acidity regulators, and sodium. So we don't use flavoring. We don't use preservatives. We don't use gelling agents. And it's kind of cutting out the unnecessary things that are in a lot of these products and focusing on simplicity and ease of being able to fuel. And like you said, it's a super, super crowded market.
As you rightly pointed out, it's a very cutthroat and crowded market. How do you cut across? Because you are a relatively small player, and there is loads of bigger companies globally that have bigger budgets, just bigger everything. How do you compete or not? How do you position yourself to stand out?
Yeah, I would say us being a smaller company and a new emerging company is actually really advantageous to us compared to some of these larger companies. The fact of the matter is, yes, these other companies can make a more carbohydrate rich product. These other companies can make a more simple product. There are powers at play in those other companies that will affect, their ability to charge a very accessible price. So that's a huge advantage that we have. I think that it's incredibly important for our sport and the health of our sport to be able to make it a bit more accessible. Sports nutrition is if you look at the ingredient list, it's commodities that make up the product, and it doesn't need to be as expensive and complicated as it is. Now, if you think of other companies out there that exist like Morton or SIS or, so on and so forth, like they make exceptional products. I know they're not going to drop their prices because of what's right for athletes, and they're not going to drop prices because we're pressuring them to do so. They have expensive marketing campaigns. They have expensive payrolls to make. And, there's, there's also investor oftentimes priorities that they're balancing. And so us being a smaller company allows us to be a little bit more flexible and be able to charge a much more competitive price.
Yeah. So, pricing alone is a great way to undercut the competitors and gain a bigger market share. But is there a way like that you are thinking of the overall customer experience, like how are you are educating the customers to your products, how you are engaging with the local bike racing community? Because I'm guessing your product is targeting people that enjoy taking care of their nutrition, taking the best that they can be in their riding goals. So that's a very specific kind of like audience that you have. So, in what steps
Yeah.
are you doing to kind of to critically inform those people and reach those people?
Yeah, that's a huge part of what we're trying to do. Because beyond just the price, I know we were focusing on that for a moment. The other big thing is the
Mm-hmm.
carbohydrate density of the product. So it's 50 grams, which is huge compared to most
Yeah.
things. The way I think about it is if we can get someone to fuel a little bit more than they would have otherwise. So if they grab this gel instead of, some 20, 30 gram and they're new to fueling and they're new to this whole thing, like they are going to notice a difference, that they feel better,
Yeah.
and they're going to realize that there's a benefit to consuming more. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that that plays a big role in the longstanding love someone has for the sport, because it matters for how good you feel and how enjoyable your experience is. So from an education standpoint, I think the consumption of the product is a big educating piece. If they're new to fueling and they try something more dense, that will be an educational opportunity. Uh,
But then again, I'll give you my example. So, well, I used to ride my bike quite a lot and taking part in long grand fondos and even races. Not anymore because I became a father, so that recently, so that kind of cycling has been taking a bit of a step back. But I've always suffered from gut problems, and I've tested multiple products, and I found kind of a range of products that I use and allow me to ride at what I feel is my best and come
yeah.
out of the ride and still feel okay. So, I'm potentially a person that is looking for solutions that best serve me when I'm riding the bike to reach my athletic goals.
Yeah.
So, what? How do you activate these products then when you are from a business perspective, from a marketing perspective, when you get to even have the capture my attention?
Yeah. Yeah. When people find something that they like, it's really hard to get them to do something different. It's always easier to do the same thing than it is to change. And so that's, the big question, and that's the big task that we have, so my biggest priority, as an emerging player in the sports nutrition world, is to get as many gels into as many hands as possible. The
Mm-hmm.
fact of the matter is I believe in our product and that people will love it and they will feel
Yeah.
great from it. So the trick is, let's get you to try the gel. So there's a lot that goes into that execution, but some of the major things are, event presence and activation,
Yeah.
whether that's, races or group rides, things like that, places where we can be able to talk about the product and educate the customer and give them samples so that they have the opportunity to try it. It can also look like getting into retailers. That's a huge priority of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Is to open up as many bike shops and as many run stores and so on as we possibly can, because suddenly now we have, retail staff that are educated on the product and the mission, and they are able to
Yeah.
talk to customers and give them the opportunity to try it. So that's a huge way that we're getting in front of people. And then it's working with really great athletes, and it's working with people that
Mm-hmm.
either customers identify with or aspire to be,
Yeah.
and that can serve as motivation to try something new. But I mean, all in all, like, we can take all of those measures to get people to try it, but it is difficult to change behavior, and food is an emotional thing, especially, and when people find something that works for them, it is a bit of an uphill battle to get them to change.
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the community engagement through taking part in events, putting it in front of people. I mean, in cycling, cycling culture is very deeply rooted in community aspect. Every community has its unique challenges. You have clubs, you have federations, associations, and from a kind of a business perspective, like what percentage of time do you spend thinking and putting resources into as a up and coming business in um, activating brand presence, marketing campaigns to reach new audiences? How much resources and much time do you put into that?
I think any amount of time isn't enough time devoted to that. I think I do as much as I can. So for us, I'm the only full-time person behind Carbs Fuel,
Mm-hmm.
which I think a lot of people don't realize. We've got 7 people on the team, but
Yeah.
they're working mostly in their free time. So if something needs to happen, for the most part, it's me needing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got 20 different jobs. So I kind of have to spin my chair around and put a different hat on and then do something else and then spin around again and do a different job. And so with all of that in mind, though, a huge percent of my time is focused on marketing efforts, because if I cut through all the noise, and all the things
Mm-hmm.
that are pulling my attention,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, what's most important is get our product to more people. And so what can I do in the day to day to be able to have that happen? It's primarily marketing activations, and retailer sort of activations. And so it's constantly on my mind. Now, I think we fall into this trap of doing mostly cycling sort of events and community focused
Mm-hmm.
activities. And it's mainly because I'm a cyclist, and
Yeah.
that said, running, there's more runners than there are cyclists. And that's a huge, huge market to tap into. And uh, I find myself falling into the trap of focusing on gravel racing people, because that's what's going on in the US and that's what I know and that's what my connections
Mm-hmm.
know. And, it's easy to fall into one specific community as opposed to spreading across all of these different diverse communities.
Yeah. I mean, it's you have to start somewhere. As a solo entrepreneur, you have to start somewhere, and you have to serve kind of that niche, and really focus on serving that niche, and then from that grow and expand. So it's I guess is the conundrum of solo entrepreneurs is that they have to find first the solution to a problem that resonates with people. And if that's successful to that core group of people, then you can grow from there. As we pointed out already, you can't really, as a small business, you have to kind of position yourself against the big brands, and you have to
Mm-hmm.
poke them, because that's how you're going to get people looking at you, going people like, in a way that you position yourself from. That's people are going to start noticing. Okay, well, he's doing something there that is different. Let me hear what he has to say.
Yeah.
Because as a small business, it's kind of it's very difficult to start replicating what the big brands, you mentioned some of them, are doing in your space, because you don't have the resources. That alone is itself a no-go. So I guess what you kind of alluding is like figuring out a way of cutting through the noise.
Yeah.
And it is so important to grow. What I mean, you mentioned working with a team of 7 other people, but you being the only full-time employer, or sorry, full-time employee of the company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from a personal level, putting 20 hats a day to just trying to spin plates, it's not easy. I mean, there's no ways about it. Not 2 ways about it. Sorry, I was messing up my saying. But how do you manage the balance between entrepreneurial responsibilities? And you mentioned that you have that you enjoy going bike rides still, that you are part of a bike racing club, I think, Holy Cow. You know, and how do you balance this? This is my first. That's a question because I wanted to ask you, because there was a quote from the founder of BrewDog, which is a beer here in UK. But one famous quote that he has is, the work-life balance was created by people that work in 9 to 5 jobs and hate their jobs. As a founder, as an entrepreneur, there's no such thing as work-life balance. So, what is your take?
Yeah. I mean, I think with COVID and people going to work from home, I think the whole concept of work-life balance is, the lines are getting blurred,
Mm-hmm.
of where where work starts and where work ends. So I think everybody faces that challenge, but you know, it's been something I've navigated quite well, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I prioritize riding my bike and doing what I
Yeah,
love. I make a point every single day to ride my bike. Not every single day. There's occasionally days where I won't, but I
that's
try to do
impressive.
something. Yeah, and it's not doing 4 hour rides, but it's doing something. If it just means getting out for an hour or an hour and a half, that's plenty. Because I think in the whole bike industry, it's really easy to stop riding bikes. And then you kind of ask yourself the question of, why am I doing this? Like
Yeah,
none of
yeah,
us.
that's something I've heard it from people working in the cycling industry very often. Is like the longer I spend time working in the cycling industry, the less time I spend time riding my bike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're spending all day talking about bikes, and then, if you take your free time to then go ride bikes, you need a little bit more to your life than just bikes. And so I think that's a challenge. But the thing is, like, you don't go into sports nutrition for serious
Mhm.
endurance athletes, or you don't go into the bike industry to get rich quick. Like there are much more lucrative industries. You do it because you love the community and you love the sport and you love being around it and living that lifestyle. And so I try to never forget why I'm doing it and,
Yeah,
not lose touch with, the whole reason we're doing this. So I always make it a priority to get out and ride my bike. I often do it around lunchtime, and I find it really helps me be productive. It's a good reset point. I am most productive in the first few hours of the day, so I
yeah,
think of my 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. as like my high IQ time. That's when I'm doing the really important big stuff. And that's
okay,
where I'm really, really locked in. And then I go take a break and I ride my bike, and that's a reset. And then once the afternoon comes, that's when I can do things that are a little bit more mindless, because there's a lot of mindless activities that I need to do in my day to day.
yeah,
And it's easy to let those bog you down. And so I try to really chunk out my day as like focused in
yeah,
the morning, big initiatives like how are we expanding internationally? How are we launching onto Amazon? Like the big problems that we need to solve, and where it takes my brain to like make the
yeah.
right decision, not just a decision. And taking that break is critical in my mind to go ride my
Hmm.
bike.
To reset, yeah. I mean, I'm going to open here a parenthesis because just for the people, for the listeners listening in, I mean, Gabe is recording this podcast from Boulder, I believe.
Well, so I live in Golden, typically just south of Boulder,
Oh,
but right
okay,
now I'm actually at my partner's family house in Fort Collins.
okay. But just for the people listening, that it's 8 a.m. where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'll take this as a compliment that you are taking time off your high IQ time to spend time with me. So thank you.
No, I'm happy to. I gotta be sharp for this.
So I'm interested as well because we have been in the cycling industry, we have been talking for years and years about business credentials when it comes to sustainability. And as a new brand that comes into the market, I think it's paramount that they need to put the right tactics to have a sustainable product.
Hmm.
And it's really a critical focus. It's a shame that like it takes so long and it takes a lot of effort for companies to do more of it and to show more of it to its audiences because it's something that audiences want. They want to know the sustainability credentials of a product. I mean, if you look at Gen Z demographics, that is something that they really value in new brands and they really look for that. So, how is Carb Fuel integrating, environmental consciousness practices into the product development and really the business operations?
Yeah, this is a really big problem in sports nutrition in general. I think starting with the fact that there is no such thing as a sustainable consumer packaged good product, you know? Like it doesn't exist unless everything that's used to manufacture the product is returned to the earth as compost. And so no
Yeah.
matter what, it's making a negative impact on the environment.
Hmm.
And that's a problem. I mean, the fact of the matter is our gels are single use packets, so you use
Yeah.
it once and now it's waste, so it is a major problem. It's not unique to us versus others. It's just across the whole industry. And that shouldn't just be the answer of like, is what it is. So to tell you what we're doing as of today, and where our mind is at, we're not doing everything that we can be doing in the long run. And it's something that I'm aware of and that I intend on improving over time. I mean, from a big picture standpoint, right now we're just selling in the US. All of our ingredients, with the exception of cluster dextrin, come from the US. And so from a footprint standpoint of where things are coming from, that minimizes what goes into it. It's double the carbohydrates in an energy gel, which is essentially cutting packaging waste in half if people are consuming the same amount, which is a good impact. Our product is also vegan, which makes a big difference, and it's a very simple formulation, so not a ton of different products coming from a ton of different places. So in some ways that's a good thing. Now, there are measures that other brands are doing that are better than ours from an environmentally sustainable standpoint. So, some companies are making recyclable materials for their energy gels, for example. Some places are making more bulk servings like jugs or pouches, to where it's cutting down the packaging waste quite a bit. And, those are the sorts of things that we absolutely are evaluating. It's going to be a negative impact on the environment no matter what, but how can we minimize that best? So whether that's recyclable materials or even, there's some exciting changes in compostable packaging materials that's been going around. I went to this whole packaging expo in Chicago a couple months ago, and there was a lot of discussion around this exact topic and how can these brands make packaging and, fulfillment decisions that are better for the environment. And so as a small emerging brand that's focused on value and, making an exceptional product at an exceptional price, it's challenging to be able to make those extra differences for the environment. But, I think that's not an excuse to not do it. It's something that we want to do more and more over time.
Okay, I guess it's a growing. I don't want to say growing pain, but it's part of like a kind of objective of the business from what you're saying. But it's not been implemented from the get go. From what I can gather, you're trying to move to that and to a more to where you can consider the options of a more sustainable product or kind of thinking about the circular economy.
The whole reason we exist is to help more athletes effectively fuel their sport. So the number one priority for us is let's make the best quality product that we possibly can. Let's make it really simple and convenient, and let's make it really affordable because that's what's right by athletes and that's what's going to get them to consume more and feel better in their sport. So that's our number one priority. And the unfortunate reality is a lot of these sustainable decisions are more expensive, and that makes it even more difficult for us to accomplish exactly what we're trying to accomplish. And so as a smaller company where our volumes are much smaller than one of these big players, for example, we have to be really, really careful with what sort of investments we make on what's our hill that we're going to die on. And so we've been able to establish this really great consumer base now, and the product is getting out there and people are loving it. And so now we have more and more opportunity to make those adjustments and to be really conscious of what can we do in our business. And it's fine if we lose a few percent on margin, if it's the right thing for the environment. Like I 100% will prioritize that, but we have to also make sure it's gonna not sink the business from a from a cost standpoint.
I wanted to kind of building on that, actually, kind of building on the three kind of the pillars that you mentioned about why you're doing and now why you created Carbs Fuel. That sounds like the hill you're prepared to die on. It's a fine line between creating a product, developing a product that really scientifically is backed, has the right ingredients. But all of these needs to be told. All of these needs to be communicated. And in fact, storytelling is what is going to sell you the product. It's not the science necessarily behind it. So, how do you build the compelling narrative for Carbs Fuel? How do you see the power of storytelling influencing, not just how you tell the story of the product, but how you potentially can and use it to build more market share?
Yeah. Storytelling is super important. Like you're saying, people people make decisions emotionally and then they justify it with
Yeah.
with the facts and the rationality, and our product is like a very practical product. And so it's easy to fall in this trap of like not catering towards the emotional side of things. But storytelling is where you connect with people. It's where they feel connected to a brand. And, like I was saying earlier, it's the opportunity to kind of convey a feeling that people either aspire to feel or do already. I think, storytelling, one of my favorite books, before I worked in the field that I'm in, I managed software sales teams. So pretty different. And one of my favorite books was the book 7 Stories Every Salesperson Must Tell. And it goes through all these different types of stories that you can communicate to essentially help you sell something. So it can be ways to connect personally or share insights or, kind of make someone feel like they can trust what you're doing. And I think it's a really challenging thing to do compelling storytelling and from a large scale be able to tell that story, and that's part of working with athletes, honestly, is how we can do that. That's a big way that we can work with ex-athlete and tell a story of how they were able to feel better in their sport thanks to consuming a product, how they got to this feeling that people aspire to feel, and it's ways to connect to the community. I think of some brands and this is more on the voice side of things and the personality of a brand, but like what you often see in sports nutrition companies is this feeling of you're suffering alone in the basement and you're putting in the hard miles and it's like black and white photos and, it's this feeling of being tough. And we're really trying to convey a different feeling. We're trying to convey something that's more community focused and more bright. Like our slogan is let's keep going. And we were really intentional with, every word that goes into that because let's is plural. It's like you're out on a ride with your friends and you've done the 4 mountain passes. It's been a brutal long day, but you've fueled really well. And you have this feeling after all of that of, I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. And like, that's the feeling that that's the feeling that proper fueling can bring you to. And it's a feeling that we've all felt from time to time. And it's such an amazing feeling of like, wow, I still feel really good and I could keep going on this ride. And so that's kind of the story and the feeling that we're trying to communicate. So it's much brighter. It's much more like you're with other people. You're not suffering alone.
Yeah. I mean, I wanted to touch, you mentioned community again, and I'm interested in kind of exploring a bit this, the aspect of community a bit more in the sense of, how inclusive this community is. Because that's really kind of, from a business nowadays, you really can't be, shutting doors unless that's what you want to do. But from what you said, from your motto, as a let's implies plural, implies a community. You mentioned community, engaging with local communities. How does the way you storytell this product allows people from region, races, different ethnicities, from different, you mentioned cycling, running, gravel, whatever the discipline. How is this communicate in a way that is accessible to men, to women, to different races? Because that's sometimes it's the way brands storytell can create a barrier. Whether it is it was put there like with the person behind the campaign unaware, or if there was not enough dedication. What exactly are you doing in ensuring those steps are taken to make sure that the storytelling is created in a way that is inclusive and accessible to anyone and everyone that wants to be part of your motto.
Yeah. I think that's a huge issue with the whole bike industry in general, is the lack of inclusivity. It's also such a difficult sport to get into for a ton of different reasons. And I think that adversity that every one of us goes through trying to get into the sport is what creates these barriers between us versus them, sort of thing. And I think it kind of plays into itself. I could go on a whole nother tangent of like my feelings on this subject, but the whole sport struggles with this, I think. Nutrition doesn't have to be that way. And so honestly, to answer your question, I think the product kind of speaks for itself in that way. It's super simple, and it is by a very significant margin the most affordable product. And so I think nothing gets more inclusive to all people than that. You know, we're making something that everybody can afford, and we're making something that's really simple and rooted in science and research to be, you know, what athletes specifically need. And so I think by eliminating one of the things that makes this sport so difficult to get into and so exclusive, you know, it's us doing a small positive thing for the sport in general.
I mean, it's a very difficult topic. It's something that companies, brands are getting better, and there is kind of examples of clothing brands, bike brands doing that very well. Whether it is the way they communicate, just make sure it's open, the way they are represented, the way they activate different communities, they put on events. So there is a plethora of ways of doing that. But it's interesting. I mean, with the fact that cycling is already presents high barrier to entry, because yes, you need to have a bike, and the bike costs more than a pair of trainers. But like you said, cost in itself is a way of making that more accessible to a wide range of people. And yes, you mentioned as well the running aspect, and rightly so. Running is much bigger than cycling, and is something there where communities are much stronger. And I think is perhaps where a lot of cycling brands, especially in the apparel, are looking at to identify areas for improvement in their own fields, but also partnerships, because that's, you know, if you can capture some of that audience, you have a huge market to tap onto. So I think that's definitely a way forward. And I mean, and you know, it's nothing new in the nutrition world, because that nutrition world applies to many disciplines: triathlon, cycling, swimming, running, wherever.
Like I think in bikes, one of the really hard thing is, you know, what you just said. The cost of a bike to begin with is really prohibitive for a lot of people. The cost of quality apparel, you know, there's some brands that have emerged that make really quality apparel that are really affordable. And so, you know, they're doing a great thing for that. In general, cycling apparel is really expensive, but I think it expands beyond just the cost too. You know, I think that a lot of cyclists are really, from a welcoming standpoint, not very inclusive. And it's very like, as a sport, when people feel like more guarded off and less immediate to welcome new people into it. And I'm not saying everybody's that way, but you know, a lot of people are. You know, but then there's all kinds of other barriers that go into getting into cycling that are unique to cycling too. It's like the mechanical knowledge that you need, you know, like fixing a flat tire, you know, putting back on a drop chain, and like there's a lot of like expertise you need to acquire over time on like how to work on a bike. And then there's the skill of, you know, not crashing, balancing, you know, cornering, descending. That takes a really long time for people to get into. And then there's the physical aspect where running is the same, and you know, you need to ride it all the time and get fit, and you know, that plays into these other parts of it. But I think it's just such a difficult sport to really get into. And so when I think about the responsibility of a nutrition brand, you know, like us, I think not making it as complicated as some of these brands are making it seem is what's most important. If we can eliminate one more thing that's super complicated and people don't understand, like there's so much noise of, do I need carbohydrates? Do I need fat? Should I avoid sugar? Do I need amino acids? Do I need ketones? There's so much noise. And I think you add that onto all these other complex things, and it's just another thing that adds to the heap and might be the difference between someone really knowing what to do and getting into the sport. And so I think as far as our responsibility for the community, it's let's cut through the BS. Here's what you need. We made it really simple and easy for you to get it. It's not another really expensive thing. So let's make it more simple. Let's make it more easy and effortless. So that's really, I think, our responsibility in this space. And it's not going to fix the problem. It takes all of these different parts of the wheel to make it happen. But I think that is one variable.
Very good. I mean, it's true. There's a lot of factors that create barriers, and if there is one thing that the brand can do is through their products is try to reduce that entry to barrier. I wanted to. I mean, we're talking about the certain aspects of cycling culture. It can be cliquey. Entry to barrier for this, getting a bicycle itself is already a logistical nightmare for many people, and let alone learning how to maintain it and ride it. But I mean, I wanted to understand from your perspective, being in the cycle industry, trying to cut through the noises with your products to better fuel athletes. If you could have like a magic wand and change one thing about the global cycling community, the industry, what would it be? And how do you see that, the thing that you want to change, contributing to a better cycling industry, to a better cycling community?
Yeah, to be honest, the wish I would have doesn't actually have to do with carbs. So for me, it's more in line with what I'm trying to do with Holy Cow, and it's to break down barriers between cyclists. And it's to connect more people who like bikes. I think that there's such a tribe mentality, and maybe it's just human nature and it's not going to change because people naturally think of it as there's us and then there's them and we're not the same. But in my mind, like as bike riders, it should be the bike rider tribe, in my opinion, not this team versus that team versus this club versus these people who aren't a part of a team. There's so much separation within side of cycling. And I think we all do the same sport for pretty much the same reasons. And there should be way more connection and community than there actually is. Like with like the cycling scene in Colorado, if I just take it specifically here where I live, like there are so many different cycling teams and they pretty much are the same exact team. They will not ride with each other. No, they will not go on the other team's group ride. There are rides where it's like, this is for this team. Other people are not welcome unless it's a recruitment ride to get you to join the team. And I think that's so disturbing for the sport. And it's like, there needs to be much more of a sense of community, and there needs to be better opportunities for people to connect with other people. Like I said, we're all doing this same activity because we love it for the same reasons. Why does there need to be this separation? And I think there are inherent challenges with that because different people have really a wide range of abilities. So it's natural to want to separate. Some people are a lot faster than other people, and some people have different intents on how long and hard they want to ride. And so, that does create separation. But, I think there needs to be a lot more connection.
I agree. I mean, the Holy Cow, the cycling group that you have founded, we haven't really touched on that, but you mentioned at the top of the show about people that opening this space for people that want to ride bikes, and I wanted to explore that a bit more because you mentioned at the top of the show that was something that whenever a person wants to join Holy Cow cycling ride or bike. Whenever a person wants to join your group, Holy Cow, you always tell them about your story. I wanted to try and understand, so to give you an example to put an example into the words you just said about what you want to change. How does the Holy Cow group, cycling group, represent this change that you want to see in the
Yeah.
cycling world, cycling community?
Yeah. I'll start off with it's not perfect because I run carbs, as my full-time job. There's only so much time that I can dedicate to Holy Cow. And so I live in a constant state of guilt for not doing more. But, I created Holy Cow to try to solve that problem that I just alluded to the best I could local to our community. It's not a national or even
Yeah.
global sort of
Yeah, of course,
approach,
you have
but
to start
more.
small. You have to start where you live.
Yeah. And so like I was describing, when I'll back up. Like I mentioned earlier, I got burned out from the sport because I wasn't going to be a pro, and I refound my love for the sport, for the reasons that I described earlier.
Yeah.
So when I moved back to Colorado, like a few years ago, and I was feeling really motivated on the bike, I decided I want to develop more of a sense of community in Colorado, and I was feeling motivated on the bike, and I thought, let's join a cycling team. It
Right.
could be a good way to make bike friends and do
Yeah,
fun
for
bike
sure.
stuff with them. And maybe I'll do some races. It could be fun to push myself, but also maybe I won't. We'll see what my motivation and fitness says. I don't want to feel a responsibility to do
Yeah.
so. So when I looked around for teams, I felt like they were all classic roadie elitists, very cliquey. You had to know someone who thought you were cool enough and fast enough to invite you to a recruitment ride, and then there were all kinds of obligations to do X number of races, do this, do that. And like I
Okay.
just described, for me, it was, I just want to make some bike friends, do some fun bike adventures with people that I enjoy and,
Yeah.
maybe push myself if I want to. And so I wasn't seeing it within the classic cycling team. And then the classic cycling club wasn't serious enough. There wasn't enough of a sense of like belonging and camaraderie and community. And, it wasn't people that I typically would ride my bike with. And it was like too casual. And so I felt like I was in this middle ground where I wanted something less serious than a race team, but more serious than a club. And there was nothing that existed. And so that's
Okay.
why I made Holy Cow, was to kind of fill that gap. And the reason it's really grown is because I think that resonates with a lot of people. And it's meant to be this platform where like we have 150 people on the team now. And we have this, we use Slack, the team communication platform. And, it's become this place where all these different riders are connecting with other different riders and going on bike rides together. It's
Yeah.
kind of, you get out what you put in, and not everybody is super active in it. But I think what's been really great about it is we have broken down some of those barriers between people and exposed more people to similar like-minded cyclists and given them an opportunity to get together.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we're doing right now. Like, we're also trying to join other group rides all of the time and normalize,
Yeah.
different people showing up to different rides as
Very
opposed to
good.
us creating new group rides. Because if we just make everyone wear the same kit and we organize Holy Cow rides, we just did the same thing that already existed. We just
Exactly.
made
Yeah.
another different ride. I'd rather not make these rides and go say, let's go join this group ride that already exists. And let's normalize this idea of different people joining in.
Very good. Very good. I mean, well, it sounds like you have created something that, in a very, very entrepreneur fashion, you identified the gap in the market. You thought, how well, I need to figure out a solution to, that suits me and that will resonate with other people. And along the lines, you have created it, and hundreds of people have, well, 150, as you said, have joined you. So they also saw the benefits in what you created. So I mean, kudos to you in that kind of activating that the community and finding a way of getting more people to see the benefits of riding bikes. And from a personal perspective, and this is a question I ask everyone on the podcast, what does success look like to you?
I think if I can live a life where I get to spend quality time with the people that I love and where I can live a life and spend time doing the things that I love, like riding a
Yeah.
bike and traveling, and that I can make an impact on the communities that I care about, like the cycling community, then That's success to me. And I think life is as simple as that. I think having time is really the goal. I can enjoy my activity, I can enjoy the people, and I can enjoy the community. And I think that looks like success to me. I don't need to be a billionaire. It's about having time more than anything.
So you come to the point of the podcast where every guest leaves a question to my next guest. And the question that was left for you is the following. What are you doing to foster diversity in your organization? And is it enough, or could you be doing more?
To foster diversity in my organization, are we doing enough? Definitely not. Like I said, I mean, I'm the only full-time employee, so, that's not very diverse from the get-go. Yeah. I would also say the majority of the athletes that we sponsor are white men, that race gravel bikes, and I'm aware of that every single day. And I think it's really, really important to foster diversity. And I think the whole cycling industry struggles with this right now. It's as an emerging company, we're kind of going with what we can get and what people naturally, the people that are naturally interested in working with us. And so it's kind of the way it's naturally played out. But I mean, 100%, that's huge priority that we're not really doing anything, frankly, as of today. And I think that it can be a lot better. Okay.
Well, it's that you know where you are, where you stand, and you know what you need to do. So that's that's a great starting point.
Yeah.
I wanted to now put you to open to you. What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
Do I get to know who the guest is?
No.
I guess I could take a similar approach as they did for what's important to me. I mean, for what's important to me is breaking down barriers and connecting more cyclists. So what are they doing, or what do they want to do that's going to connect more people to ride bikes together when they otherwise wouldn't have?
Very good. That's a good question. It's kind of can go in many different ways. Brands, organizations, individuals like you and myself that are that enjoy riding our bikes, I think should think more consciously, because the more people that ride bikes, the better it is for everyone, and just it kind of is a snowball. The benefits just start to increase incrementally. Plus, is a great way. Is a great way to connect with one-to-one. The same way you started Holy Cow, there's many other people. I started Ride to Success to connect people that have used the bike to transform their lives. So, there's different ways of making that connection. There's different mediums. So thanks for sharing that question with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Gabe, thank you very much for sharing your story, the purpose that you have, that revealing a little bit about what drives you and the aspects of the business, Carbs Fuel. So thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for the time. It was fun to get to talk through all this stuff.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to Ride to Success on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. Leave us a review and share this conversation with someone who might need a dose of inspiration or motivation. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopez. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And remember, this is a podcast run solely by me. If you have any feedback, please feel free to share it. Until next time, ride your own success.